A child has been kidnapped from a wealthy Glasgow suburb. Another macabre find troubles DCI John Lomond just as deeply. Has the Sandman returned? 5 years ago, personal tragedy forced Lomond off the trail of this notorious serial killer, and he's never forgiven himself. The book I'm referring to is The Bonnie Dead by Andrew Raymond. It's one of our top finds of 2025 so far. So we invited Andrew to join us here on video evidence to read a little from the novel and to introduce us to his main character, DCI Lomond. Now it's over to Andrew in Glasgow.
I didn't set out to try and write a terribly revolutionary detective. I just set out to write one who felt real. Writing the book was really easy once I figured out who Lomond was, because the plot for me always comes from character. That's just the way that I've always written. When I realised that Lomond's past was as much an antagonist as the Sandman was, the book became much easier to write, and I really knew exactly where Lomond was going to go. I don't really believe that you can have a character that doesn't change throughout the course of a book and have them still be kind of compelling. So I asked myself, okay, how is he going to change? What is it that he's battling? And he's kind of battling this notion that the world is a terrible place filled with terrible people, and they're doing terrible things, which is what he has seen on an almost daily basis as part of his job. And I was kind of reminded of that line in the movie Seven, where Morgan Freeman comes in a voiceover with that Hemingway quote that the world is a fine place and worth fighting for. And Morgan Freeman adds at the end, I believe the second part. And I think that that's who Lomond is. Really, he believes that's how he sees the world, and he accepts the world as it is, which is pretty damaged, but it only becomes broken if good people choose to do nothing, and that's what drives him every day to kind of keep going. With that in mind, here's a little introduction to DCI Lomond himself. This is the first time he appears in the book itself. Detective Chief Inspector John Lomond closed his front door behind him, taking in the sight of his tiny, dismal flat, before dropping his suit jacket on top of a pile of unopened junk mail and takeaway menus. He hadn't needed the jacket since leaving at 5:30 that morning. The arms and chest were heavily creased from carrying it, scrunched in his hand all day like a cheap bunch of petrol station flowers, taken from car to office, to Greg's, to office, to home again. He cursed the infernal summer heat. After all, it was Scotland in July. It wasn't as if summer was an actual thing there. Summer was something that only ever happened down south. But for once, Glasgow was in the middle of a heat wave that was now in its 7th day. Like any senior officer who had put in time at many stations through the years, Lomond had acquired a number of nicknames. While at London Road Station, working for major investigations, he was known simply as Bigyan, on account of his 6'3" frame, as well as Lurch and Bigfoot. One of the more literary-minded sergeants had christened him the Long Dark, also because of his height and his often broodingly dark personality. His wife Ailey had often remarked that his inability to make nice chat at work drinks or functions was the main reason he had languished at Chief Inspector level for so long, while much less talented officers than him had climbed the greasy ladder at Police Scotland's Dalmarnock headquarters. When in the company of fellow police, all Lomond wanted to do was talk about inquiries, and no one ever talked about inquiries at work functions. They talked about football or TV, or who might be secretly shagging who. Those senior officers in Dalmarnock were there because they had a talent for talking about themselves. Always lobbying. The only lobbying Lomond had ever done was increasing prison sentences on murderers, rapists and paedophiles. Lomond sighed as he entered the living room. You little arseholes. He had left the windows open all day, and now 3 serious-looking wasps were having a major scrap in the middle of the room. Getting them out required a feat of coordination, for as soon as he had cajoled one of them out by flapping a small cushion, another had come buzzing back in. Getting them all out took up another 15 minutes and left him sweating even more than before. After a cold shower, he returned to the living room, wrapped in a towel, refreshed and chilled. The room was sparsely furnished. Books on forensic science and Scots law and true crime were piled in loose stacks on the floor. Judging on furniture alone, a stranger might have surmised that Lomond had just moved in or was on the cusp of leaving. There was a TV stand in the corner that had been left by the previous tenant, but Lomond hadn't brought a TV with him. He hadn't had one for years. In the place of a TV was a hi-fi and turntable. Currently playing was the Blue Niles, the Downtown Lights. He hadn't exactly pushed the boat out when it came to decoration. He was renting rather than paying a mortgage. He might have been earning over 60 grand a year, but his move to Paisley was only supposed to be temporary. It had seemed pointless buying somewhere in, quote, Scotland's biggest town, which was another way of saying it was close to being Scotland's smallest city. Resale in Paisley could be a nightmare, and Lomond had no intention of acquiring a financial anchor in Paisley. Renting made more sense. That was 5 years ago. Since then, he had covered the plain magnolia walls with newspaper clippings, police records, witness statements, various maps of Glasgow, and suspect mugshots. At the centre were 5 young faces, all of them under 10 years old. The youngest was 4. Their eyes glowed with innocence, gap-toothed grins and rosy cheeks. School ties knotted clumsily and pulled aside for official primary school photographs. They had started as the missing, then they were the dead, and finally, christened by a Glasgow Express reporter as the Bonnie Dead. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the book. I hope you can pick up a copy sometime soon. Bye-bye.
That was a wonderful introduction to the Bonnie Dead. While working in the book trade, Andrew began writing and self-publishing thrillers, including The Bonnie Dead. Now, that novel and its 3 sequels have been picked up by Vinci Books and republished in print, so Andrew can see his books on the shelf alongside the likes of Ian Rankin and Val McDermid. He could just be the new voice in Tartan noir. We've reviewed The Bonnie Dead on our website, Crime Fiction Lover, and we've also interviewed Andrew on the site. We've provided links to these in the description with this video. Also included is an Amazon Associates link so that you can check out The Bonnie Dead forthwith. A big thank you goes out to Andrew Raymond for reading for us today, and a big thank you to you too for joining us here on Video Evidence.